Envelope on Marcus Reed's kitchen table had been sitting there for 3 days. He didn't need to open it again. The number was already memorized. Nia's ER bill from last month, the deposit for her new school, and a bank account that had stopped pretending weeks ago. The math didn't work. It hadn't worked in a while. So when an unknown number called on a Tuesday afternoon, he answered. The woman's voice was even and unapologetic. Her name was Vanessa Cole, CEO of Cole Group, a name that showed up in business sections Marcus didn't usually read. She needed someone to accompany her to a fundraising gala on Friday evening. Not a date, a role. One evening, standing beside her, presenting the image of a stable partner to the investors and cameras she couldn't afford to disappoint right now. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Through the after-school fence, he watched Nia showing her best friend something on a folded piece of paper with the seriousness of a diplomat. He asked how much. Vanessa told him. 1 evening, he said. 1 evening, she confirmed. He called back in 8 minutes. I'll do it, but my daughter stays out of this entirely. That's non-negotiable. Vanessa agreed without hesitation. They would meet Friday, 30 minutes before the gala, in the lobby of the Hargrove Hotel. Marcus would wear the suit from his cousin's wedding. Vanessa would look like someone who had never worn anything twice. It was supposed to be simple. 1 night, 1 role, 1 envelope solved. Neither of them knew that Adrian Cole, Vanessa's ex-husband, would walk through those same doors before the evening was over and make sure nothing stayed simple. If you're already hooked, this story is exactly what this channel is about. Real tension, real characters, real stakes. Hit subscribe so you don't miss where this goes. Marcus Reed was 34 years old and had not taken a single day off in 14 months. He'd been a licensed architect once, the kind with a firm, a salary, and a 5-year plan. That was before Nia's mother left when Nia was 2, before the firm downsized, before he restructured his entire life around a small person who needed him more than any career ever had. Now he worked freelance, renovation consults, drafting contracts, the occasional design project for clients who paid late. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him home by 6, and Nia never went to bed without him reading her something first. He was not a man who asked for help. He was the kind of man other people leaned on without noticing they were doing it. Steady, quiet, present. The kind of man who noticed when something was wrong and said nothing until he could actually do something about it. That quality was, unknowingly, exactly why Vanessa Cole had chosen him. Vanessa Cole ran Cole Group the way a surgeon runs an operating room, with precision, full authority, and zero tolerance for unnecessary conversation. At 38, she had built the firm from a mid-size regional investment company into something that made national business press pay attention. She was good at her job the way some people are good at surviving, out of necessity, then out of habit, then because it became the only identity that didn't cost her anything. Her personal life was not something she discussed, not because she was ashamed, but because she had learned, specifically and painfully, that vulnerability had a price tag she couldn't afford to keep paying. The upcoming partnership deal with Hargrove Capital was the largest of her career. What her team didn't know, what she hadn't told anyone, was that Hargrove's senior partner had made an offhand comment at their last meeting about stability. He'd smiled when he said it. He'd meant her personal life. She'd smiled back and said nothing. By Wednesday, she'd made a phone call. Adrian Cole was the kind of man who walked into rooms like he already owned them. Not through aggression, but through a particular brand of charm that made everyone around him feel slightly honored by his attention. He was handsome in the way of men who knew it young, polished, socially fluent, and beneath all of it operating always on a single question. What does this person have that I can use? His marriage to Vanessa had lasted 6 years. To the outside world, it looked like a power couple. Inside, it was something else entirely. Nia Reed was 8 years old, gap-toothed, and deeply convinced that every problem could be solved with enough information. She kept a notebook where she wrote down questions she wanted to research later. She did not know her father was under financial pressure. Marcus had made sure of that. But she knew when his jaw was tight and when his laugh was real, and she kept that knowledge quietly, the way children do when they love someone too much to ask. They met at 6:30 p.m. in the lobby of the Hargrove Hotel. Marcus arrived first. He stood near the entrance in his navy suit, hands in his pockets, watching the kind of people he didn't usually share rooms with move through the marble lobby like they'd been born into it. He wasn't nervous. He was calibrating. Vanessa walked in at 6:32 and he knew immediately it was her. Not because she was the most polished woman in the lobby, though she was, but because she moved like someone who had already decided how the evening was going to go. She stopped in front of him, looked him over once, the way people assess a room before entering it. Marcus Reed. Vanessa Cole. They shook hands. Business clean. She guided them to a quiet corner, away from the early arrivals beginning to filter through. She had a small card with 2 names on it. The Hargrove Capital Partners she needed him near. She explained the context in 4 sentences. She did not over-explain. He appreciated that. "Here's what I need," she said. "Calm, present. If someone asks how we met through a mutual friend at a gallery opening 8 months ago. If someone asks what you do, tell them the truth. It'll read better than a cover story." She paused, then added with a measured evenness, "One more thing. My ex-husband Adrian Cole may be aware of tonight's event. It's unlikely he'd show, but if he does, stay close and follow my lead." Marcus nodded. "And if he tries to make contact?" "Let me handle it." Something moved across her face. Fast, controlled, gone. He noted it. He didn't push it. They established the remaining terms clearly, standing in that corner like 2 people signing a contract, which in every practical sense they were. 1 evening only. No contact after. No mention of Nia. Not her name, not her existence, not even a vague reference to his personal life. Vanessa had agreed to that condition before he finished the sentence. "I chose you," she said, "because someone who knows you told me you don't perform, that you're exactly what you appear to be." "That's true," Marcus said. "Then just be that tonight. That's all I need." It was a clean arrangement, honest in its dishonesty, which Marcus found oddly easier to respect than the alternative. He knew what this was. She knew what this was. They walked into the gala together at 6:58 p.m. By 7:40, Adrian Cole was already in the room. The gala occupied the entire 3rd floor of the Hargrove Hotel, 3 connected ballrooms with the walls folded back to make one long, gleaming space. Crystal overhead, linen below. The kind of event where the flower arrangements cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, and nobody thought that was worth mentioning. He stayed close to Vanessa without crowding her. That was the first thing he got right. The second thing was that he listened. When she introduced him to a silver-haired man named Douglas Hargrove, Marcus shook his hand and asked one genuine question about a project he'd overheard Hargrove mention to someone else 30 seconds earlier. Hargrove's eyebrows lifted slightly. He answered. Marcus nodded with the focused attention of a man who was actually interested, because he actually was. The project involved structural retrofitting of a historic building in Philadelphia, and that happened to be something Marcus knew about. Hargrove talked for 4 minutes. Marcus said very little. When they moved on, Vanessa leaned close and said quietly, "That was the right thing to do." "I know," Marcus said. She glanced at him sideways, not annoyed, something closer to recalibrating. That was how the first hour went. Marcus moved through the room the way he moved through most unfamiliar spaces, carefully, without apology, paying attention. He wasn't performing ease, he simply wasn't rattled by rooms that were designed to make certain people feel small. He had grown up in spaces that tried to do that. He'd learned early that the room didn't get to decide. Vanessa noticed. She noticed the way people responded to him, not with the deference they gave each other, but with something more useful. Genuine comfort. He was easy to be near, not because he was performing warmth, but because he wasn't performing anything. For the first time in longer than she could cleanly remember, she didn't feel like she was running the evening alone. At one point, near the end of the first hour, Marcus stepped slightly aside to text Denise, the neighbor watching Nia, to confirm everything was fine at home. He kept his phone in his hand afterward, checking the time, and absent-mindedly left his voice memo app running in his jacket pocket as he slid it back in. He didn't notice. He had other things to pay attention to. Then, at 7:40, Vanessa stopped mid-sentence. Marcus followed her eyeline across the room. A man had entered through the far ballroom doors. Tall, well-dressed, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who had decided long ago that no room was off-limits to him. He was speaking to one of the event coordinators with a smile that looked genuine from 20 feet away and probably felt like something else up close. "That's him," Vanessa said. Her voice had dropped half a register. Not fear, something older than fear. Recognition of a specific kind of danger. "Adrian," Marcus said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Marcus watched Adrian Cole work the edge of the room, touching elbows, leaning in to laugh at things, scanning the space with the practiced ease of a man executing a plan he'd thought through in advance. His eyes moved across the room and landed eventually on Vanessa. He smiled. It was a full, warm smile, the kind that, if you didn't know better, would make you smile back. Vanessa's grip tightened around the glass in her hand. One knuckle went white. Marcus shifted his position, almost imperceptibly, a half-step that placed him slightly more between Vanessa and the direction Adrian was moving. He didn't announce it. He just did it. Vanessa felt it. She exhaled once, slowly, and straightened her spine. Adrian reached them 12 minutes later. He moved like a man who had all the time in the world, which Marcus recognized as a specific kind of threat, the kind that wanted you to know it wasn't in a hurry. "Vanessa." He said her name with a warmth that implied ownership. Then he turned to Marcus with an extended hand and a smile that arrived slightly before his eyes did. "And you must be the new addition, Adrian Cole." "Marcus Reed." He shook the hand, firm, brief. "Marcus." Adrian repeated the name like he was tasting it, deciding something. "What is it you do, Marcus?" "Architecture, freelance consulting." "Ah." A small pause, not long enough to be rude, precisely long enough to land. "Wonderful. Vanessa always did appreciate, how do I put this, the unconventional choice." It was a clean hit, wrapped in pleasantry, impossible to directly object to. Marcus met it with silence and a level expression, which was the only response that cost Adrian anything. Adrian turned back to Vanessa, and the temperature of his voice shifted entirely. Lower, more familiar, carrying the specific intimacy of shared history weaponized. He asked about the partnership deal. He mentioned names she hadn't told Marcus. Internal names, board-level names. He was showing her the map of how much access he still had. She knew it. Marcus could see her knowing it. She held her composure, but something behind her eyes had gone very still, the way water goes still before it freezes. Eventually, a colleague pulled Adrian away. He left with the same unhurried smile. Marcus watched him go, then looked at Vanessa. "You okay?" "Fine," she said automatically. "That's not what I asked." She looked at him then, really looked, the way people do when they're deciding whether or not to be honest. Then she set her glass on a passing tray and said quietly, "Give me 10 minutes." They found a small anteroom off the main corridor, a narrow space with a service table and 2 chairs that nobody was using. Vanessa sat. Marcus sat across from her. No one had orchestrated this. It just happened, the way honest conversations tend to find their own corners. She didn't perform composure in that room. There wasn't enough space for it. "He doesn't come to these things," she said. "He was never invited, which means someone gave him access, or he manufactured it himself. Either way, he's not here by accident." "I figured," Marcus said. She was quiet for a moment, then, "The marriage wasn't loud. That's the thing people don't understand. There was no screaming, no scenes. It was quiet, constant, like water damage. You don't see it until the wall comes down." Marcus said nothing. He let her have the space. "I spent 3 years after the divorce convincing myself I was over it," she continued. "Then he walks into a room and I'm holding a glass so hard I almost break it." She paused. "That's embarrassing." "No," Marcus said. "That's just how it works." She looked at him. You sound like you know." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "After Nia's mom left, I used to rehearse being fine. Every morning. Like if I practiced long enough, it'd become true." He exhaled. "Nia was 2. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I couldn't let her see me not know." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "How old is she now?" 8. Going on 45. Something softened at the corner of Vanessa's mouth. Not quite a smile, but the shape of one. "She's why you said yes," Vanessa said. "She's why I do most things," Marcus said. They sat with that for a moment. 2 people who had built their lives around not falling apart, recognizing that quality in each other without having to name it. Outside, the gala continued. They would have to go back. But for those few minutes, neither of them was performing anything. The speech was scheduled for 9:15 p.m. At 9 o'clock, Marcus found Vanessa standing alone in the corridor outside the main ballroom, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the middle distance. She had her remarks on a small card in her left hand. She wasn't reading it. She was somewhere else entirely. He stopped in front of her. 15 minutes, he said. "I know." He looked at her. The composure was back in place. Hair, dress, posture, all of it exactly right. But her right hand, held at her side, was pressing her thumbnail hard into her index finger. A private tell, the kind people develop without knowing it. "You've given this speech 100 times, he said. "Not this one. This one matters." "They all matter when you're in them," Marcus said. "Doesn't change how you do it." She looked at him with a kind of focused exhaustion. "What if I get up there and he's standing at the back of the room and I lose it?" "Then you lose it for 2 seconds and come back." He said it plainly, without cushioning. "But you won't."
You don't know that.
"No," he said, "but you do." She held his gaze. He didn't fill the silence with reassurance she didn't need. He just stayed there, present, steady, the same way he stayed in every room. Then he said, "You don't have to be the most polished version of yourself tonight. You just have to be the most honest one. Those people in there, they can feel the difference." Vanessa looked down at the card in her hand. She read it once. Then she folded it and put it in her clutch without looking up. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay," he said. She walked onto that stage and did not look for Adrian. She spoke without notes. She spoke about Cole Group's founding, about the decade of decisions that had brought them to this partnership, about what it meant to build something that outlasted the circumstances that created it. She didn't use the polished language from the prepared remarks. She used her own, which was sharper and less safe and considerably more true. Douglas Hargrove, seated in the front row, leaned forward in the 4th minute. He did not lean back. When she finished, the applause was genuine, the kind that starts half a second later than polite applause because people are still processing. Vanessa stepped down from the stage and walked back to where Marcus was standing near the side wall. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. After a moment, she said, Hargrove leaned forward. "I saw," Marcus said. "That's good." "I know," she exhaled. A long, quiet release of something she'd been holding since 7:40 p.m. Then she looked at Marcus, and something in her expression shifted. Not dramatically, not in any way that anyone across the room would have noticed, but it was there. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it in a way that had nothing to do with the contract. Marcus nodded. He understood what she meant. He understood, too, that something between them had just moved past the boundary they'd agreed on in the lobby. Not crossed, not broken, just quietly relocated to somewhere neither of them had mapped. It was the best moment of the evening. Neither of them knew it was also the last good one. Across the room, Adrian Cole was already on his phone. The first sign came at 10:15 p.m. One of Vanessa's junior associates found her near the bar and leaned in with the careful expression of someone delivering bad news they didn't fully understand yet. There were messages from press contacts. Someone had tipped 3 separate entertainment and business reporters with the same story. That Cole Group's CEO had hired an escort to pose as her boyfriend for the Hargrove Gala, that the relationship was fabricated, and that the company's public image had been deliberately managed to deceive potential partners. The word escort had been chosen specifically. Marcus understood that immediately when Vanessa relayed it to him. It wasn't accidental sloppiness. It was a loaded word designed to detonate in a particular way, to reframe Marcus as predatory and Vanessa as desperate in a single syllable. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but she pulled out her phone and made 2 calls in quick succession, her PR director, then her attorney. Marcus stood beside her and said nothing. He was watching Adrian across the room, who was still socializing, still smiling, giving every impression of a man enjoying a pleasant evening. His phone was now in his jacket pocket. Whatever he'd needed it for, he was done. He moved fast, Marcus said quietly. He always does, Vanessa said. That's how he operates. By the time you see it, it's already happened. The second sign came 40 minutes later, at 10:58 p.m. Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his jacket. He checked it. A text from an unsaved number he didn't recognize. Your daughter's school, Elm Creek Elementary, room 14, Ms. Patricia Davidson's class, Nia Reed, age 8. He read it twice. His chest went completely still. Then a second message from the same number. Nice evening, Mr. Reed. Hope it stays that way. He looked up slowly. Across the ballroom, Adrian Cole was watching him. Not obviously, the way a man watches a room, casually, with peripheral attention. But their eyes met for exactly 1 second, and Adrian smiled in a way that didn't reach anything above his jaw. Marcus put his phone in his pocket. His hands were steady. That was a practiced thing, keeping his hands steady when everything else wasn't. He turned to Vanessa. I need to step outside for a moment. She read his face. What happened? A message. About Nia. Her expression shifted immediately. Marcus! It's a warning shot, not action, not yet. He said it calmly because he needed it to be calm while he assessed. But I need to make a call. He stepped into the corridor and called Denise. She answered on the second ring. Everything was fine. Nia was asleep. Nobody had come to the door. The building was quiet. He stood in that corridor for 30 seconds after he hung up, breathing through it. Then he called Nia's school, left a voicemail for the principal, described the situation briefly and clearly. His daughter might be approached by strangers or press. Enhanced caution starting tomorrow morning. He went back inside. He told Vanessa what the message said. He watched her face go through something private and painful. The understanding that she had, despite her explicit promise, allowed Marcus's daughter to become a variable in a situation she'd guaranteed him Nia would never enter. I'm sorry, she said. She said it without defense. It's not your fault, Marcus said. He meant it. But it changes things. She nodded. She knew it did. They both looked across the room at Adrian Cole, who had returned to his conversation and was laughing at something someone had said, perfectly at ease. The evening had stopped being about the gala a long time ago. They found the anteroom again. This time it wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Vanessa's PR director had called back with a second piece of information. Adrian wasn't just feeding stories to reporters, he had documents, specific documents. Her attorney had gone quiet on the phone in a way that meant something serious, and that silence had followed Vanessa into this small room and sat down with them. Tell me, Marcus said. She stood near the service table, arms crossed, not looking at him. For a long moment she didn't say anything. Then she did. During the marriage there was a period, about 8 months, where I wasn't okay. She said it clinically, the way people describe old injuries when they've spent years learning to discuss them without bleeding. It wasn't visible from the outside. I kept working. I kept running the company. But inside I was gone mostly. I'd been isolated from most of my support system. I didn't fully understand at the time how deliberately that had been done. Marcus said nothing. He waited. Adrian presented me with paperwork during that period. He told me it was standard divorce documentation, asset division, standard clauses. She paused. I trusted him, which sounds absurd now, but when you've been managed by someone for long enough, trust stops feeling like a choice. It just becomes the path of least resistance. What was actually in it? Marcus asked. A provision. She finally looked at him. Buried in the language. It gave him advisory authority over major strategic decisions at Cole Group for a period of 5 years post-divorce. Not controlling interest, not a board seat. Something quieter than that. The kind of language that doesn't look alarming until someone who knows what they're reading actually reads it. Did anyone catch it? My attorney caught it 14 months later. By then, we'd been divorced for over a year. She exhaled. We believed it was voidable, signed under duress, in conditions that weren't fully informed. But pursuing it legally meant making the circumstances of that signing public, which meant making that 8-month period public. She stopped. I chose not to. Marcus understood what that choice had cost her. He understood it completely. So he's been holding it, Marcus said, the whole time. He doesn't need to activate the provision. He just needs me to know he can. She unfolded her arms and pressed her palms flat on the table. And whenever I've considered speaking publicly about what the marriage actually was, he reminds me, quietly through intermediaries, that the story of how I signed that document is part of the same story. He keeps you silent by making the truth the weapon, Marcus said. Yes, she said it simply. The moment I tell the truth about him, I have to tell the truth about me, about who I was during those 8 months. And that version of me, she stopped again. I've worked very hard to make sure the world never meets that version. Marcus was quiet for a moment. She sounds like someone who was in a bad situation, he said, not someone who did something wrong. Vanessa looked at him sharply, not with anger, but with the startled expression of someone who had just heard a thing said plainly that they had spent years refusing to say to themselves. She didn't respond to it. She wasn't ready to. But she heard it. The documents went public at 11:34 p.m. Not all of them. Adrian was too precise for that. He released exactly enough. A scanned copy of the provision, 3 paragraphs of surrounding context, and a short recorded conversation, edited with surgical care, in which Marcus's voice could be heard discussing payment for the evening. The recording had been made in the lobby. Someone on Adrian's side had been there before they arrived. Within 20 minutes, it was circulating across 2 financial news platforms and a gossip outlet that specialized in the intersection of money and scandal. By midnight, it had been picked up by 4 more. The framing was consistent. Cole Group CEO stages relationship to secure major investment deal. Man hired to play the role. Marcus's name was in 2 of the articles. His profession was listed. One outlet had already found his business website. Vanessa's phone stopped being a communication device and became a record of damage. Her PR director called. Her board chair sent a terse message asking for a conversation first thing in the morning. Douglas Hargrove's assistant emailed at 11:51 to say that Mr. Hargrove would be in touch regarding the partnership timeline. Vanessa stood in the middle of the ballroom, emptying now, staff beginning to move through with collection trays, and read each message with the focused stillness of someone taking inventory after a flood, cataloging what remained, what didn't. Marcus was beside her when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Elm Creek Elementary, the after-hours line that forwarded to the principal's cell. He'd left that voicemail less than 2 hours ago. He answered. The principal's voice was measured but serious. A man had been seen outside the school's side entrance earlier that evening, not a parent, not recognized by the night custodial staff. He'd been photographing the building. When approached, he'd left without incident. Police had been notified as a precaution. The principal wanted Marcus to know before morning. Marcus thanked her. He hung up. He stood there for 3 seconds with the phone in his hand. Then he said, "I have to go." Vanessa looked at him. She knew immediately. Not from what he said, but from the quality of stillness that came over him. The kind that meant something had reached the boundary he'd named on the very first call. "Is she safe?" Vanessa asked. "She's safe, but I need to be there." He was already moving, not rushing, but decided, the way he moved when the decision was already made and only the motion remained. "I'm sorry. I know the timing." "Go," Vanessa said. "Marcus, go." He nodded once. He left. Vanessa watched him move through the thinning crowd toward the exit and felt something she recognized too well. the particular loneliness of watching someone leave a room. It didn't matter that she understood why. It didn't matter that it was right. The image was the same image. The man she had for one evening stopped performing around, walking out the door while everything fell apart around her. She knew it wasn't what it looked like. She knew that. But the part of her that had been left before, quietly with good reasons, by people who had also been doing the right thing for themselves, that part didn't care about context. It just registered the shape of the moment. He left. She turned back to the room. Her event, her deal, her name in articles being written right now by people who had never met her. She picked up her phone and called her attorney. She had work to do. Marcus got home at 12:23 a.m. Denise was asleep on the couch, the television on low. He thanked her quietly and walked her to the door, then stood in the hallway until he heard her apartment lock click shut. He checked the front door, checked the windows. Then he walked to Nia's room and stood in the doorway. She was asleep on her side, one arm around a stuffed dog she'd named Gerald, her notebook on the nightstand where she always left it. The nightlight made everything in the room amber and small and entirely separate from the world he'd just come from. He sat down on the floor with his back against the door frame and stayed there for a long time. He thought about the man photographing the school. He thought about a text message with his daughter's classroom number in it, sent by someone who wanted him to understand exactly how exposed he was. He thought about Adrian Cole laughing across a ballroom, completely certain that Marcus would do what Marcus had done. Gather his daughter and retreat, because that was what a man with something to lose always did. And he thought about Nia's notebook, the questions she wrote down, the way she'd told him once with complete seriousness that the only way to stop being scared of something was to learn everything about it. She was 8 years old and already braver than he was behaving. He could pull back. That was the rational move. Finish the contract, cash the check, and stay inside the perimeter of his own life. Adrian had shown him the reach. The message was clear. Stay quiet and nothing happens to what you love. But Marcus knew, sitting on that floor in the amber dark, that if he stayed quiet because he was afraid, he was teaching Nia that fear was a legitimate reason to abandon someone standing in the middle of a burning room. He couldn't teach her that. He wouldn't. Across the city, Vanessa sat at her kitchen table with her attorney's notes spread in front of her and a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The legal picture was complicated but not impossible. The provision could be challenged. The circumstances of the signing were documentable. There were emails. There were medical records from that period. There was a paper trail that Adrian had never expected anyone to dig up because he'd always trusted that Vanessa's silence was permanent. It had been, for a long time. Because telling the truth meant telling all of it. The signed document, the 8 months, the woman she'd been when she was too worn down to read what she was signing. But sitting there at 1 a.m. with her name in 6 news articles and her biggest deal hanging by a thread, she understood something with sudden, exhausting clarity. She had been living inside Adrian's silence for years. She had built her entire public self on top of it, careful, controlled, untouchable, and he had been counting on that. Every single day, he had been counting on it. She picked up her pen. She began to write. Marcus called Vanessa at 7:15 a.m. She answered on the first ring, which told him she hadn't slept. "I'm coming back," he said. "Not for the contract, that's done. I'm coming back because I was there and I know what actually happened, and I'm not going to sit on that while Adrian rewrites it." A pause. "Marcus." "I recorded him. Last night in the ballroom when he first approached us. I had my phone out checking the time and hadn't realized my voice memo was still running from earlier. It's not perfect audio, but it's clear enough. You can hear him. The tone, the framing, the way he positioned himself. It won't fix everything, but it establishes that he was running a play, not stumbling into a conversation." Another pause. Longer. "You'd have to go on record," she said. "My attorney would need a statement. Your name would be attached to this publicly, more than it already is." "I know. It could get worse before it gets better." "I know that too. Your daughter is the reason I'm doing this," he said. Not the reason I'm not." Vanessa was quiet for 3 full seconds. When she spoke again, something in her voice had shifted. Not softer exactly, but less armored. Like a window opened in a room that had been sealed for too long. "My attorney is here at 9, she said. "Can you be here at 9? "I'll be there at 8:50. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Marcus gave his statement, turned over the recording, and answered every question Vanessa's attorney put to him with the same flat precision he used when explaining structural load calculations to clients, clearly without embellishment, without omission. The recording was not perfect, but it was real, and reality had a texture that edited audio didn't. When placed alongside the timeline, alongside the text messages sent to Marcus's phone with Nia's classroom number, alongside the metadata from the leaked documents that Vanessa's attorney had already begun pulling apart, it built something Adrian hadn't anticipated: a coherent, documentable counter-narrative. Adrian had expected silence, from both of them. He had engineered the entire situation around the certainty that Marcus would protect his daughter by disappearing, and that Vanessa would protect her past by staying quiet. He had bet, based on years of evidence, that Vanessa's greatest vulnerability was the 8 months she never talked about. He had not accounted for Vanessa deciding to talk about it. The press statement went out at 2 p.m. Vanessa wrote it herself, which her PR director initially objected to, and then stopped objecting to when she read it. It was not a defensive document. It did not use the language of crisis management. No clarifications, no context, no passive constructions designed to say something while meaning nothing. It said in plain sentences what had happened: the marriage, the isolation, the 8 months, the document she had signed because she had trusted the wrong person at the worst possible time. It named what Adrian had done with enough supporting documentation attached that any attorney reading it would understand immediately that this was not a statement made in anger. It had been prepared. It was meant to hold. At 2:47 p.m., Adrian's attorney called Vanessa's attorney. At 3:15 p.m., Adrian himself called Vanessa's cell. She looked at the screen. She let it ring. The cost was real, and she didn't minimize it. Douglas Hargrove's office called at 4 p.m. to say the partnership timeline was being extended pending internal review. 2 board members requested emergency calls. One of Vanessa's largest institutional clients sent a carefully worded email that said nothing directly and meant several things indirectly. She sat with all of it. She didn't perform composure, and she didn't fall apart. She made notes, responded where response was required, and left the rest for tomorrow. At 5:30 p.m., Marcus texted her. "How are you doing?" Not a question mark, a statement that wanted an honest answer. She looked at it for a moment. Then she typed, "Terrible. Also better than I've been in 3 years. Both things are true." His response came 30 seconds later. "That's usually how it works." She read it twice. Then she set her phone face down on the table and, for the first time since the night before, she smiled. Small, private, unperformed. Outside her window, the city continued at its ordinary volume, entirely indifferent. She found that, for once, she didn't mind. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon that had no particular significance, Marcus sent Vanessa a text. "Nia and I are at Riverside Park, the one on Caldwell. If you want to see what a normal Saturday looks like, now's a good time." He put his phone in his pocket and didn't wait for a response. Either she'd come or she wouldn't. He'd meant it as an open door, not an expectation. Vanessa arrived 40 minutes later in jeans and a light jacket, looking like someone who had dressed carefully to appear as though they hadn't dressed carefully. She spotted them near the swing set. Marcus on a bench with a coffee cup, Nia in motion, pumping her legs with total commitment, her notebook sitting abandoned in the grass below. Vanessa stopped a few feet from the bench. "You came," Marcus said. "I almost didn't," she said. She sat down beside him. "I know. I figured 50-50. It was closer to 40-60. Against? Against." She looked out at Nia. "I don't do parks." "Nobody does parks until they do," Marcus said. They sat quietly for a moment. The afternoon was ordinary in every direction. A dog being walked in circles, two kids arguing over a basketball, the distant rhythm of the city running its weekend errands. Nia dragged her feet to slow the swing, then twisted around to look at the bench. She took in Vanessa with the direct, assessing gaze of a child who had not yet learned to disguise her curiosity. "Are you my dad's friend?" she asked. "I think so," Vanessa said, still figuring that out. Nia considered this answer, found it acceptable, and then asked, "Do you know how to do underdogs?" Vanessa looked at Marcus. "Push her on the swing," he said. "You run underneath." "I know what an underdog is," Vanessa said with a dignity that made Marcus smile into his coffee cup. She stood up. She walked to the swing set. She pulled the swing back and ran underneath in a way that was deeply uncertain and entirely genuine. Nia shrieked with approval and demanded another. Vanessa did it again, better this time. Marcus watched them. He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. The Hargrove deal was renegotiated and eventually signed, 6 weeks after the gala. Smaller in scope than originally structured, but on terms that were entirely Vanessa's. Adrian's legal position collapsed quietly under the weight of documentation, and the provision was formally voided. He did not call again. Vanessa never described what came next between her and Marcus as a relationship. Not for a long time. It was slower than that and more careful. A Saturday here, a phone call there, a Sunday morning when Nia decided Vanessa needed to know about every question in her notebooks. There was no contract, no role, no agreement about what it was supposed to look like. Just two people who had already seen each other at their most honest, deciding, slowly, deliberately, without performance, that was enough to build something on. And that's where their story begins. Not at a gala, not in a contract, but on a park bench, on an ordinary Saturday, with a little girl teaching an untouchable CEO how to do an underdog. There's something worth holding on to in that. The idea that the most important things in life rarely start the way we plan. Marcus didn't set out to be anyone's hero. Vanessa didn't set out to let anyone in. But they both chose, when it was hard and costly and uncertain, to stop performing and start being honest. That choice, small, quiet, unglamorous, was the whole thing. If this story stayed with you, you're in the right place. This channel is built for stories like this one, layered, real, and worth your time. Subscribe and come back for the next one.